An urgent command is issued to close the top as tensions rise in a volatile moment. A voice demands attention, warning that if the disturbance continues, there will be serious consequences. Compliance is reluctantly given, acknowledging the warning with a quiet affirmation. Bryce Rhodes, the man at the center of this storm, is observed smiling, baffling those around him. When questioned, Bryce offers a chilling reason. He smiles simply because he can. He stands accused of the brutal murders of two teenage boys, Larry Ordway, 14, and Maurice Gordon, 16, whose charred bodies were found following a grim 911 call. Authorities arrived to find the victims lifeless, their bodies burned beyond recognition. The victims were children, innocent lives cruelly taken. Shoe prints found at the scene hinted at the perpetrator's path. When Elizabeth Wren, the boy's mother, received the devastating news, her world shattered into irreparable fragments. The horror deepened with the revelation of how her sons met their end. The brutality was so extreme that police intervened to prevent Elizabeth from viewing her son's remains. The question lingered: what could drive someone to commit such a heinous act? Bryce Rhodes claimed the boys held a secret, one that threatened to unravel his life entirely. But what was this secret, and why did it lead to such a grisly fate for two young teenagers? What compelled Bryce to exhibit such despicable behavior when confronted by law enforcement? On May 21, 2016, a 22-year-old woman cycled past a desolate, abandoned building on River Park Drive in the Shawnee neighborhood of West Louisville. That day, something unusual caught her eye. An unsettling change had occurred. The building, intact just the day before, was now reduced to ashes and ruin. Curiosity overcame caution, and she ventured closer to investigate the destruction. Amid the charred remains, a disturbing shape emerged out of place and ominous. Her heart raced as she realized she had stumbled upon a lifeless body. The horror intensified with a second discovery. Nearby, another badly burned body lay hidden among the rubble. Terrified, she immediately contacted the authorities, summoning help. Soon the scene was swarmed by police officers scrambling to piece together the grisly puzzle left behind. One officer, visibly shaken, struggled to hold back emotion as he covered the two bodies with a stark white cloth. The remains were swiftly transported for autopsy as investigators combed the site for any trace of evidence. While medical experts conducted their grim work, detectives scoured the scene, desperate for clues to unlock the mystery. Autopsy results revealed a chilling truth. The fire was not the cause of death. The coroner's report detailed severe blunt force trauma to the victims' heads, alongside multiple stab wounds to their chests. Even more haunting, the boys had died hours before their bodies were set ablaze and abandoned. With murder confirmed, the police faced the daunting task of identifying the victims and uncovering the motive behind such savage violence. Despite the charred condition of the bodies, investigators managed to produce sketches hoping to ignite leads from the public. These images were released with an urgent plea for anyone who recognized the boys to step forward and aid the investigation. The efforts went beyond mere sketches. Authorities scoured missing persons reports filed days earlier, searching for matches to the victims' descriptions. Yet days slipped by without a single identification, the mystery deepening with each passing hour. On May 23, 2016, a distressed woman named Elizabeth Wren arrived at the police station. Her anxiety was palpable as she confirmed that the sketches matched her sons Larry Ordway, 14, and Maurice Gordon, 16. The officers delivered the devastating confirmation her sons' bodies had been found reduced to charred remains. Investigators informed Elizabeth they suspected foul play, ruling out any accident and pointing to a calculated murder. Elizabeth's desperate wish to see her sons one final time was gently denied by the authorities. The condition of the bodies was too horrific for a mother to bear witness. Despite her heartbreak, Elizabeth gathered the strength to share a critical detail with investigators. She recounted how on the evening the tragedy unfolded, her sons had told her they were going out with friends she distrusted deeply. Despite her warnings and attempts to keep them away, the boys left that night to join a party. The group included 3 individuals: Jakery Taylor, 17, Anjuan Carter, 15, and Bryce Rhodes, 25. Elizabeth voiced grave concerns about Bryce Rhodes, a man with a criminal record marked by domestic violence, assault, kidnapping, and abuse. Though her sons promised to return soon, days passed without a trace. Yet Elizabeth tried to hold on to hope. Her sons were known to party and sometimes disappear for days. She believed this night was no different from the others. Unbeknownst to her, this night would shatter her life forever. The police acted swiftly, determined to track down everyone involved. They located Anjuan Carter and brought him in for questioning without delay. As the search intensified, law enforcement located Bryce by the next day, Tuesday, May 24, 2016, closing in on their prime suspect. On that very day, Jakery Taylor, another member of the group, was also taken into custody, all happening within a narrow window of time. Bryce and Jaquari endured hours in police custody, each separately interrogated about the disappearances of Larry and Maurice. Detectives attempted to rattle Jaquari by exposing him to crime scene photos of the two brothers, hoping to unravel details about the murders. Yet Jaquari maintained his defense, admitting friendship with the brothers, but denying any involvement in their deaths. Meanwhile, Bryce insisted he had no knowledge of the brothers' whereabouts and eventually demanded legal representation. With both Jaquari and Bryce withholding useful information, investigators shifted their strategy. During separate questioning, a noticeable change in Anjuan's demeanor emerged. Under mounting pressure, Anjuan finally disclosed the chilling events of the evening of May 21st. He recounted how Bryce had summoned him and Jaquari to his apartment that night. There, Bryce confided his fears that Larry and Maurice might reveal a secret they witnessed on May 4th. A secret Bryce was desperate to keep hidden. Bryce convinced Jaquari and Anjuan to join in a sinister plan, one that culminated in the fatal decision to kill the brothers. On the night in question, Jaquari approached Larry and Maurice's home, luring them out with promises Bryce would take them to a party. Though hesitant at first, the brothers eventually agreed to go along. Before leaving, they reassured their mother Elizabeth that they would return later that evening. The group drove to Bryce's residence, a house he shared with his mother, who was absent that weekend. At first, the party seemed innocent, with the boys relaxing and enjoying themselves as any group of teens might. Yet beneath the surface, a dark and violent plan was unfolding. Suddenly, tension erupted into an argument that shattered the party's fragile calm. Anjuan later revealed that Jaquari accused the brothers of stealing money from Bryce. Confronted, Maurice's anger flared, feeling threatened. Maurice armed himself with a knife, intent on protecting both himself and Larry, escalating the situation to a dangerous tipping point. Jaquari then commanded Maurice to kneel and beg for forgiveness. He restrained him with some kind of binding. Larry was tied up separately in the bathroom. One witness recalled that when Maurice brandished the knife, Bryce swiftly intervened and disarmed him. Together, Bryce and Jaquari overpowered the brothers and bound them tightly with belts. They intentionally separated Larry and Maurice, preventing any chance of resistance. Larry was confined to the bathroom while Bryce forced Maurice to his knees in the living room. Maurice pleaded desperately for their lives, but Bryce demanded more. He wanted Maurice to beg for forgiveness. Anjuan and Jaquari watched helplessly as Maurice's tearful pleas filled the room, clinging to hope that mercy might spare them from the impending horror. Bryce's cruelty soon revealed itself in its most brutal form. He laid a blanket on the floor beneath Maurice, then covered his head with stockings and forced a rag into his mouth, silencing any cries. What followed was an unrelenting assault. Bryce beat Maurice savagely and stabbed him repeatedly in the chest. The other teens, frozen in terror, could only watch as the scene unfolded in gruesome detail. Bryce's menacing presence cast a shadow over the witnesses, and he coerced Anjuan into stabbing Maurice, forcing him to participate in the atrocity. Terrified of Bryce's wrath, Anjuan complied, delivering a single stab to Maurice's chest. Anjuan's chilling testimony continued, describing how after Maurice's death, Bryce dragged Larry from the bathroom into the blood-soaked living room. Larry's heartbreak was palpable as he confronted the lifeless body of his brother. Maurice's corpse was pushed aside as Bryce fixed his cold gaze on Larry. Witnesses could still hear Larry's anguished voice begging for his life, a plea that fell on deaf ears. Larry endured the same horrific fate inflicted on Maurice. Anjuan recalled hearing Larry's desperate cries moments before Bryce stabbed him 20 times in the chest. Once more, Bryce compelled Jaquari to stab Larry, forcing him into complicity with a single wound. With both brothers dead, Bryce loaded their bodies into a car and summoned another acquaintance to assist in disposing of the evidence. As Bryce and his friend drove away with the bodies in the back seat, Anjuan and Jaquari remained behind at the apartment, tasked with cleaning the grisly scene under Bryce's orders. What unfolded next? Anjuan described how crates were placed down carefully. Clothes were loaded, and he, along with Corey, were left alone in the house. In his continued confession, Anjuan revealed that Bryce transported the brothers' lifeless bodies to an abandoned lot and set them ablaze. Flames consumed Maurice and Larry's remains on that ill-fated night. Yet by a stroke of fortune, their bodies were not reduced to ashes. It was through Anjuan's detailed interrogation that police finally uncovered the grim truth behind Larry and Maurice's tragic deaths. Still, questions lingered in the minds of investigators. What connection had the brothers shared with Bryce? What secret had sealed their dreadful fate? Larry and Maurice were ordinary teenagers bound by stepbrotherhood and a close bond, living lives filled with youthful promise. Their lives changed dramatically when they crossed paths with Bryce in 2015, drawn in by his magnetic personality. Bryce, a rapper with several music videos online, projected an image of success and wealth that captivated the brothers immediately. Larry and Maurice found themselves captivated by Bryce's lifestyle and magnetic charisma, gradually pulled deeper into his world. As their bond with Bryce grew stronger, he introduced them to one of his close associates, 17-year-old Jake Taylor. The trio's circle expanded further when they met a fourth teenager, 14-year-old Anyuan Carter, who joined their group in 2015. They spent countless hours with Bryce, who chauffeured them around, bought clothes and food, and handed out money for their personal use. In a revealing police interview, Jake disclosed that Bryce promised them fame if only they followed his path. Elizabeth noticed a distinct shift in their behavior during this time. Their social media pages filled with images of fake weapons, stacks of cash, cigars, and women painting a picture of a dangerous life. They began attending parties regularly, sometimes disappearing for days at a time. On the night of May 4, 2016, around 12:30 a.m., they were returning from yet another party. Maurice was behind the wheel of Bryce's car with Jakery beside him, while Bryce and Larry sat in the back. Anyuan followed them in a truck. Suddenly, Bryce commanded Maurice to slam the brakes as he spotted a man walking along the sidewalk of South 41st Street in Louisville, Kentucky. Bryce struggled to place the man's identity until it clicked. He was Christopher Jones, a 40-year-old figure targeted by local gangs. But Bryce made a fatal error. He mistakenly believed Christopher was someone else, a rival attempting to collect a reward on his head. That misjudgment changed everything in an instant. In a moment of panic, Bryce pulled out his gun and fired through the car window, hitting Christopher in the chest. The teens were frozen in shock, witnessing murder unfold mere feet away. Without hesitation, they sped away, driven by fear and adrenaline coursing through their veins. Christopher was rushed into emergency surgery, but the wounds proved fatal. He died on the operating table. Bryce drove the group home, warning them sternly to keep silent about the night's tragedy. Yet in the following weeks, Larry and Maurice couldn't escape the horror etched into their minds. They began distancing themselves from Bryce, their unease growing with each encounter. Meanwhile, Bryce's own anxiety mounted. Fearing the brothers might expose the shooting, he plotted drastic measures to silence them forever. He resolved to end their lives. On the evening of May 21, 2016, Bryce made a chilling decision to kill 3 people, all in a desperate bid to protect himself. But now the weight of his deeds began to close in. Under intense interrogation, both Jakery and Anyuan confessed to 3 counts of aiding and abetting murder, as well as tampering with evidence. Because they were minors, they received 10-year sentences in juvenile detention to be followed by adult prison terms upon turning 18. Their plea agreements required them to testify against Bryce at trial. Since Bryce's arrest, he has sown chaos throughout court proceedings. Victims' families believe he did so deliberately. They suspect he aimed to disrupt the process, aware the prosecution sought the death penalty. Bryce gambled that creating enough turmoil might delay or prevent the ultimate sentence. Early on, Bryce shocked the courtroom. He spat on his court-appointed attorney upon discovering the attorney's friendship with the victim's grandfather. This conflict forced the attorney to withdraw, complicating Bryce's defense. Court footage later captured a physical altercation between Bryce and another attorney. Bryce hurled insults, calling his opponent a coward, and issued a chilling threat to see him upon release. As a result, Bryce was restrained in court and made to wear a spit mask during future hearings. Despite these precautions, his courtroom behavior showed no signs of improvement. At one hearing, he even threatened the judge and her family. Bryce's antics continued unabated. He frequently refused to allow his attorneys to speak on his behalf, citing distrust. His refusal forced him through 3 different state-appointed lawyers. It was clear he was intent on controlling the proceedings, no matter the consequences. Bryce insisted that regardless of agreement, higher courts would hear his case. He declared he was doing everything in his power to defend himself. He demanded his statements be recorded at the court's discretion. Despite accusing the court of favoritism toward the Commonwealth, Bryce maintained his right to file motions and speak out. He vowed to voice his concerns, suspecting undisclosed personal relationships influencing the case. Bryce openly questioned whether bias or improper ties affected the courtroom decisions. He directly confronted the judge and prosecutor. Every motion he filed was denied, fueling his accusations. He claimed even his best motions were rejected. He challenged whether racism or personal entanglements played a role. His questions hung in the courtroom air unresolved. Was it prejudice, favoritism, or mere mistake? The answer remained elusive. During a tense exchange, Bryce faced an accusation about alleged ties to the Ku Klux Klan. He firmly denied any such affiliation, questioning the validity of the claim. Despite the accusation, Bryce remained confident that the higher courts would ultimately settle these matters in due time. The dialogue shifted swiftly as the presiding officer urged to proceed without dwelling further. The courtroom moved on to the next topic, leaving the unproven allegations behind. Bryce was reminded that his concern should be his own conduct, not the actions of others. He echoed this, emphasizing his focus on self-preservation. Amid mounting frustration, a pointed question arose about why Bryce's counsel remained on the case despite ongoing complications. The inquiry probed whether personal bias influenced the decision to keep his attorney assigned. In response, it was made clear that the real issue was the failure to provide effective legal representation. The defense team struggled to find adequate counsel for Bryce, resulting in less than ideal representation. Bryce vowed to escalate complaints to the Bar Association and the ACLU, determined to uncover the truth. He insisted he would discover the facts behind his counsel's continued involvement. Acknowledging the tension, it was agreed that a future court date would be set to revisit these issues. Bryce promised swift action, determined to expose the inner workings of his defense. Later that year, in 2017, Bryce attempted a desperate escape from prison, digging a hole within his cell walls. Prison officers discovered this escape attempt along with a threatening note Bryce had sent to Jakery. The chilling message read, "Rats get exposed." He challenged Jakery to prove he was not a traitor, revealing Bryce's relentless manipulation even behind bars. Questions arose about whether a fair trial was possible within Jefferson County's courts. Concerns were voiced about the alternatives available should fairness be in doubt. The complexity of weighing pros and cons in such a high-stakes situation was acknowledged. A judge addressed the courtroom directly, commanding attention. He warned a disruptive woman that her outbursts would not be tolerated, attempting to restore order. The judge reminded her that disrespectful interruptions would have consequences. He cautioned that if she could not control her reactions to Bryce's provocative behavior, she should consider leaving the courtroom. Acknowledging her difficulty, he nevertheless emphasized the need for decorum during proceedings. She was told firmly that speaking out of turn would not be permitted again. The judge warned of consequences should such disruptions recur. The woman complied, acknowledging the warning. Bryce, meanwhile, was observed smiling, an unsettling reaction that drew immediate attention. When asked why he smiled, he simply replied that he could. The judge noted that smiling was not a crime, but cautioned that such behavior was unhelpful to Bryce's case. He reminded Bryce of the gravity of what was at stake. Bryce insisted smiling was harmless. The judge countered that while not a crime, the behavior did not aid his defense. Bryce claimed he was out of smiles, signaling a deeper frustration. The judge advised Bryce to focus on actions that would benefit rather than harm him. Bryce expressed willingness to follow that advice. The judge confirmed mutual understanding moving forward. An apology was issued to clarify the expectations. Bryce was pressed to resume discussion on pending motions before the court. It was announced that a hearing would be scheduled to address these motions in full. The defense inquired whether any additional preparation was necessary for the upcoming hearing. The prosecution revealed they had yet to receive the motions and had not filed the petition, but were gathering extensive evidence. They sought a firm date from the judge to organize proceedings. Multiple exhibits, some lengthy, were being prepared to support the case. The trial faced repeated postponements, fueling Elizabeth's growing frustration with delays and Bryce's courtroom demeanor. Her emotions reached a breaking point during one hearing, necessitating her removal from the courtroom. In later interviews, Elizabeth revealed that despite seeking solace in her faith, the pain of losing her two sons to Bryce's violence remained unbearable. She described Bryce as sick and demonic, exposing the depths of her grief and fury toward him. After 6 grueling years of courtroom battles and Bryce's callous conduct, the scales of justice finally tipped. In 2022, Bryce Rhodes was convicted for the brutal stabbing and burning of teenage brothers Larry Ordway, 14, and Maurice Gordon, 16. These horrific murders followed the brothers' reported witnessing of Bryce shooting and killing 40-year-old Christopher Jones in 2016. Beyond the 3 murder charges, Bryce was found guilty of tampering with evidence and 2 counts of abuse of a corpse, all tied to the killings. The jury recommended a life sentence without parole for Bryce. Additional sentences included 5 years for evidence tampering and 1 year for each corpse abuse count. Though ineligible for the death penalty, Bryce's sentences would run concurrently, condemning him to spend life behind bars unless a successful appeal intervened. Following the verdict, Deborah Wren, the grandmother of the slain brothers, shared heartfelt memories through tears. She recalled that they were truly good kids. They excelled academically and were active in sports. Neither had ever been involved in trouble. Their kindness extended to everyone around them. At school, they were well liked by peers and staff alike. Their teachers held them in high regard. Sports played a significant role in their lives. The boys were seen as good kids, caught in a dark web of tragedy. Throughout the trial, the jury wrestled with Bryce Rhodes's mental state, a crucial factor in deciding his punishment. Psychologists called by the defense painted a picture of a man burdened with intellectual disability. They revealed he struggled with ADHD and bipolar disorder conditions that went largely unsupported and unaddressed in his life. Yet despite these compelling claims, the jury ultimately sided with the prosecution and the victims sealing Rhodes's fate. What do you make of this case? How did the absence of positive adult influences leave these teenage boys exposed to manipulation and danger? What steps can society take to shield vulnerable youth from falling into cycles of violence and control? We invite you to share your thoughts. If there's a case you want us to investigate, leave your suggestions below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping true crime stories. Until we meet again, stay vigilant, stay safe, and prepare for the next mystery to unravel.